Oh, hello gang. Excuse me. Today is this flipping phone. I think 19 weeks. We'll say 19 weeks, and it's 19 weeks since we were called into the office. Blah blah blah. Let's get out all the trivial stuff, as it were, first. Job-wise, we're on the Ryzen, on the clearer. 2 guides I think we're working over the weekend, and getting favourable reviews, which doesn't fill me with much hope, because my first tour was never the best of the day because I'm still waking up. I wouldn't say I'm not a morning person. I just desperately try to wake up, and I just can't. Some days I can't get out of first gear. Bunch of stuff about the government, of course. They haven't acted or looked bothered about the Russia business, but are we really surprised that Putin's sticking his oar in this country? No. Are we surprised that the Chinese ambassador to this country feigns ignorance when showing drone footage of what is essentially a concentration camp, or at least people on their way to one? No. Will we do anything about either of these things? Probably not. The days of Britain sticking its oar into things willy-nilly without care for the subsequent offence is past, really. Do we bemoan the loss of that? Some people do. But I'm foolishly, some would say, of the opinion that this country used to try and do the best thing for some people. Well, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of the Empire. I know the Empire was bad, but it wasn't wholly bad. There were good people. And one of those people was my granddad. Was being the operative word. Having received a phone call yesterday from my mum that he had a few days to go. Out of nowhere, it seems a fall he had a couple of weeks ago has probably caught up with him. He passed this morning around about 11 o'clock. It is odd how things work, in that I had the mastermind audition thing this morning at 11, and afterwards, in light of what I knew at the time, which was that he was still in hospital, or at least at the care home, my mum was going to see him tomorrow. My 2 aunts, mum's sisters, were going to see him today, I think 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. Neither of them got the chance to, because he... I tried getting to the church in town, but they're only open for private prayer until 12. I got there at 5 to 12, and I didn't have the confidence to sort of say, do you mind if I quickly say a prayer? So I did what I did when my friend died in 2012. I murmured to a God, if they're there, to just make it, and it turns out he went peacefully, which is, with the carers, they washed him like they do, and he went to sleep. And if there is a place beyond, a place up there, Granny's way in, and giving him an earful for causing trouble. '96 is a good innings, as we say in this country, even though I don't follow cricket, unlike Grandad. Both my granddads were big cricket fans. Grandad Crowd for Rent in 2007. Place up there, a place called. And Grandad was from Sydenham, South London, or sort of Pendray, sort of Crystal Palace nowadays. But when Grandad was born, the Crystal Palace was there, and I imagine Penge, Sydenham is much different to what Grandad would have known. Much different because it's South London. He said he saw the palace burn down in 36. When we saw him last year in the care home, my brothers and their respective partners, he said his mum picked up a piece of the glass from the road outside because it was running down the road sort of molten, and he didn't know what happened to it. It's a shame really, because you know, a piece of glass to anyone else when they were sorting out the house, but that was the Crystal Palace. And from what I understood, my great-grandmother, although there's stories about the family back then, I don't know exactly, either way, they lied about my granddad's age so he could join the army in 39, and I understand him to have been on a boat heading out to India when war was declared, and he ended up in Kenya. He rose to the rank of Regimental Sergeant Major, or RSM as we say, you know, and if you've seen any old film from the 50s and before, Sergeant Majors do tend to be shown as bellowing, and a Regimental Sergeant Major certainly has to. Grandad said he was the youngest in the army, so the youngest Sergeant Major in the army, and worked very closely with the natives, you might say. I'm sure that's a politically incorrect expression, but he spoke Swahili, apparently. Growing up, from when we used to go around Granny and Grandad's house in the town centre, until they moved out in 99. There was all these things from Africa, or about Africa, little wooden knickknacks of elephants, and pictures of elephants, and depictions of I guess it'd be Maasai people with shields, and not once did I ever hear Grandad speak of them in less than glowing terms. Not once was he racist. If anything, he had respect for them, and from the sounds of it, they had respect for him. Were they respecting him because he was the white man representing the British Empire? And if they didn't, no. Some people you earn respect from on merit, and I think Grandad was one of those people. He didn't see action in the war, unlike a fair few from his regiment, the King's Royal African Rifles. I've probably got the African Rifles, so it's a bit of a mouthful, but they served in Burma, part of the Forgotten Army, and the losses were great, and they included Kenyans, and they fought with distinction. For all the bluster about empire, and as I say, people of colour were treated by respect by a fair few people. Admittedly, not the main part, but having read a book about the Indians at war by an Indian, not every single person was bad. There were bad people. There were bad people in everything. Somebody says to compare the actions of the Empire to the Nazi Germany doesn't quite fit. But maybe it is. But this is the world we live in, where we can express our opinion and then stick to it. he wound up in Germany at the end of the war. I don't read this bit of it. It's murky from what I heard. The family legend has it that he threw the desk at his commanding officer, but Grandad, I'm sure, once downplayed that and said he has no recollection of that. From what, it's just some he wanted to leave the army. I don't know if he had met Granny at this point, but maybe being in Germany after Kenya was a little jarring. But everyone wanted to go home, I would have thought, in 45. And Granny was in Germany, certainly in 45, working with Monty. They married just after the war, not long after the war. 4 children. My 2 aunties, my uncle and mum, well, my one auntie, mum, uncle and an auntie. And ran a shop in Wickham and did other things as well that I don't know about in terms of work and stuff. And my earliest recollection of Grandad would have been when I was about 4 years old. We used to live next to him, next door to him, in the town centre, in a house I have faint memories of, including that ghost experience, and is now a 2-flat situation. And I had a tiny little room at the front of the back of the house, and must have been early one morning. I was always looking out the window at the car park, and Granny and Grandad were in their garden at the end of it, and they turned around and Granny gave me this big smile and raved, and Grandad raved. And then with Mum and Dad working during the day a lot when I was little, me and my middle brother, as he became, because my youngest brother was born in 1990, would spend a lot of time at Granny and Grandad's house. Sometimes my cousins would be there, and Grandad used to take us down to the canal to feed the ducks. And the memory of that is I think it was me, or maybe it was my middle brother, trod in dog mess, and Grandad got down on one knee to sort of sort it out and was wiping it on the grass and all this stuff, and these ducks suddenly came at us. Grandad was like, trying to sort it out, and my brother, whoever it was sort of leaning on Grandad. And Grandad was a keen gardener, like my other Grandad was, and we moved out in 90, but Grandad, as I say, stayed there until 1999, and he had this lovely front garden and back garden, and we were having lunch, I suppose it was, and there was a knock on the door, and Grandad goes to answer it, and still remember this lady saying pretty much, I have to say, I love your front garden, I love what you've done with you, and they had a little chat about the garden. I'm sure Grandad was chuffed. And sometimes when I head down to the canal, I go past the house, which nowadays faces onto this new build. It used to be the dairy milk place until about 2010, then they knocked it down, and you get this nice little path that narrows towards the Brook Bridge, and then you reach the canal. And I sometimes look at the front garden, and it's overgrown, it's full of weeds, and it doesn't seem like whoever lives there is too bothered about it, because it's just a mess. And I kind of want to, last time I walked past there last week, I think it was, I went to knock on the door and say, do you want me to sort your front garden out? And the trouble is, anyone can knock on the door and say, I used to live here, my granddad used to live there. About a year before I moved out, before my parents divorced and we went with Mum, this woman knocked on the door saying, I used to live here, I want to have a look around. My mum's like, well, you can't, because my husband, my dad's upstairs asleep because he does nights and all this stuff. And there were other people knocking on front doors at the time, so clearly they were up for something, but they didn't live at our house because we moved in after somebody else. And for all the problems that there were in the family, Grandad was Grandad. He had his moments. But he always seemed glad to see us. And he was when I last saw him back in February, I think it was. And I almost cried yesterday, and I feel rather blank right now. And I'm doing a YouTube video. Well, there won't be many of these after this one. This has been a very trying year. 2011 into 12 was bad. Well, 2009 into 2012 really. All that time out of work, all those job rejections, benefits, Granny dying, my friend dying. 2017 was horrific, and it's been worsening since, to be fair. I've lost a friend, job, chances of a university that could have set me on the right path, and now Grandad. And I could lose the job still, technically, because I'm on furlough. So, that is your Tuesday briefing, as it were. And, 2020 and the 2020s can close the door on their way out. I won't be seeing 2021. I'm going to go and look for 1990 and before and after, and see what we can do then.